Sarah Thompson stood confidently at the entrance of Los Angeles International Airport's exclusive private terminal, her designer briefcase held firmly in one hand and her phone in the other. The morning sun reflected off the sleek glass windows of the modern building, matching the shine of her perfectly pressed navy blue suit. At 35 years old, she had worked tirelessly to reach her position as Chief Strategy Officer at Tech Forward Solutions, one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing companies. Today was supposed to be a routine business trip to San Francisco. The company was finalizing a major acquisition, and as the lead negotiator, Sarah's presence was crucial for signing the final documents. She had taken this same trip dozens of times before, but something felt different about this morning. As she walked through the terminal's automatic doors, the cool air conditioning offered a welcome relief from the warm California morning. The private terminal was nothing like the crowded main airport terminals. Instead of long lines and chaos, this space offered peaceful luxury with its marble floors, comfortable leather seats, and attentive staff who usually catered to every need of their high-profile clients. Sarah checked her watch. 8:45 a.m. She was early for her 9:30 a.m. flight, just as she always liked to be. The familiar faces of the regular terminal staff smiled and nodded at her as she passed. Many recognized her from her frequent flights, and she had built a friendly rapport with them over the years. "Good morning, Miss Thompson," called out Maria, the usual receptionist. "Would you like your regular morning coffee while you wait?" Sarah smiled warmly. "That would be wonderful, Maria. Thank you." As she settled into one of the plush leather chairs in the waiting area, Sarah pulled out her tablet to review the merger documents one final time. The deal was worth $500 million, and every detail needed to be perfect. Her team had spent months working on this acquisition, and today's signing would mark their biggest success yet. The terminal began to fill with other passengers, executives, celebrities, and wealthy travelers, all preparing for their private flights. Sarah noticed a few familiar faces from other tech companies, exchanging polite nods with those she recognized from previous business encounters. When Maria brought her coffee, a perfect oat milk latte with an extra shot of espresso, Sarah took a moment to appreciate how far she'd come. Growing up in a middle-class family in Detroit, private jets and million-dollar deals weren't part of her world. But through scholarships, hard work, and determination, she had graduated top of her class from Stanford Business School and climbed the corporate ladder with unwavering focus. Her phone buzzed with a message from her CEO. "Everything ready for the signing? Board is excited." Sarah typed a quick response assuring him that all was in order. She had triple-checked every document, coordinated with the legal team, and prepared responses for any possible last-minute concerns from the other company. As she gathered her things to head toward the security checkpoint, Sarah noticed a new face among the security staff. A guard she hadn't seen before was standing at the entrance to the private jet area, his posture stiff and his expression stern. Something about his demeanor made her slightly uneasy, but she brushed off the feeling. After all, she had all her credentials in order, as always. Sarah stood up, smoothed her suit, and picked up her briefcase. The weight of the merger documents inside reminded her of the importance of today's meeting. She walked toward the security checkpoint with the confidence that came from years of experience and success in her field. The clicking of her heels on the marble floor echoed through the quiet terminal as she approached the security area. Little did she know that this routine business trip was about to become anything but ordinary. The next few minutes would not only test her composure, but would also spark a chain of events that would challenge the deep-seated prejudices still lurking in even the most exclusive spaces of modern society. As she reached for her credentials, Sarah noticed the new security guard's eyes narrow, his hand already raising to stop her before she had even reached the checkpoint. The morning's peaceful atmosphere was about to shatter, and with it, the illusion that success and status could shield anyone from the ugly reality of discrimination. James Miller, the new security guard, stood with his feet planted firmly at the checkpoint. His 6 months of experience at regular commercial terminals hadn't prepared him for working at the private jet area, and he seemed determined to prove himself on his first day. As Sarah approached, his hand shot up in a stopping motion, more aggressive than the usual professional gestures of other security staff. "Hold it right there," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet terminal. Several heads turned to watch the scene unfold. "I need to see your credentials and authorization." Sarah calmly reached into her briefcase and pulled out her perfectly organized documents. She had done this hundreds of times before, Her private flight authorization, company ID, and government identification were all neatly arranged in a leather folder. She handed them over with a professional smile. "Everything should be in order," Sarah said politely. "I fly through here regularly for business." James barely glanced at the documents before shaking his head. "These don't look right to me. Are you sure you're in the right terminal?" His eyes moved from her face to her expensive suit, then back to the documents, his doubt clear in his expression. Behind Sarah, a white executive walked through with barely a glance at his papers. The terminal had grown quieter now, with other passengers and staff watching the interaction. Maria, the receptionist, stood up at her desk, concern visible on her face. She had seen Sarah pass through security countless times without issue. "I can assure you these documents are correct," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady despite the growing tension. "I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Tech Forward Solutions, and I'm running late for an important meeting. Could you please point out what specific issue you're seeing?" Instead of answering her question, James picked up his phone. "Let me call my supervisor to verify these. Something doesn't seem right about this situation." His emphasis on "this situation" made his meaning clear to everyone within earshot. Sarah felt her heart racing, but years of handling difficult business negotiations helped her maintain her composed exterior. She reached for her own phone and pressed record, then dialed her company's legal department on speaker. "Hello, this is Sarah Thompson," she spoke clearly. "I'm at LAX private terminal, and I'm being denied access to my flight without explanation. I'd like to document this interaction." A group of passengers had paused nearby, including Michael Chen, CEO of a rival tech company, who had met Sarah at several industry conferences. He stepped forward, his own credentials in hand. "Excuse me," Michael interrupted. "I can vouch for Ms. Thompson. We served on the Silicon Valley Technology Board together. She's a regular on this route." James shifted uncomfortably but held his ground. "Sir, I appreciate your input, but I need to follow proper protocols." He was still holding Sarah's documents, making no move to actually verify them through any official channels. Through the terminal's windows, Sarah could see her scheduled jet waiting on the tarmac. The pilot and crew were visible, preparing for departure. The time on her phone showed 9:15 a.m., 15 minutes until her scheduled takeoff, and the important merger signing was at risk of being delayed. Other staff members began whispering among themselves. One rushed off, presumably to find the terminal manager. Sarah noticed several phones raised, recording the incident. She stood her ground, remembering similar moments throughout her career where she'd had to be twice as professional, twice as patient, and twice as prepared just to be treated equally. "Mr. Miller," she said, reading his name tag, "I understand you're doing your job, but I need you to explain specifically what issue you're finding with my credentials. They're the same ones I've used weekly for the past 3 years." The tension in the terminal had reached a breaking point. Regular passengers were now openly staring, some shaking their heads in disapproval at the guard's behavior. The whispers had grown louder, and the word discrimination could be heard clearly from several directions. Just then, rapid footsteps echoed across the marble floor. The terminal manager, Lisa Rodriguez, was hurrying toward the checkpoint, her face showing she already knew exactly what kind of situation she was walking into. The confrontation was about to reach its turning point, and James Miller's first day at the private terminal was about to become his most memorable. Lisa Rodriguez, the terminal manager, reached the security checkpoint with quick, purposeful steps. Her 20 years of experience in aviation management showed in how she immediately took control of the situation. Her face was serious as she surveyed the scene. Sarah Thompson standing calmly but firmly on one side, James Miller still clutching her documents on the other, and a growing crowd of onlookers all around. "What seems to be the problem here?" Lisa asked, though the look in her eyes suggested she already knew exactly what was happening. She had personally handled Sarah's flight arrangements many times before. Before James could speak, Sarah addressed Lisa directly. "Good morning, Lisa. I was just trying to board my scheduled 9:30 flight to San Francisco, but Mr. Miller here seems to have concerns about my credentials, though he hasn't specified what those concerns are." Lisa glanced at the documents in James's hands, then at the security footage playing on the nearby monitor. The screen clearly showed other passengers being waved through with minimal checking, while Sarah was being held up. "Mr. Miller," Lisa said sharply. "Those are valid credentials from a regular client. Miss Thompson flies with us at least twice a week." She turned to Sarah with an apologetic look. "I'm so sorry for this inconvenience, Miss Thompson. Please, let me escort you to your flight personally." But James wasn't ready to back down. His face reddened as he stood straighter. "Ma'am, I'm following security protocols. These credentials need additional verification." "What protocols exactly?" Michael Chen interrupted from the sidelines, his phone still recording. "I just walked through 5 minutes ago with the exact same type of credentials. The only difference I can see is..." He left the sentence unfinished, but everyone knew what he meant. More phones were raised now, recording the incident. Sarah's own phone was still on an active call with her legal team, catching every word. The crowd had grown larger, with pilots, flight attendants, and other airport staff gathering at the edges of the scene. "I'd like my documents back, please," Sarah said firmly, extending her hand. She checked her watch. It was now 9:25 a.m. "I have an important merger signing in San Francisco that's worth $500 million, and this delay is putting that at risk." Lisa quickly stepped forward and took the documents from James's hands, returning them to Sarah. "Mr. Miller, please step aside. We'll need to have a discussion about this incident after Ms. Thompson's departure." Her tone left no room for argument. But as Sarah began to move toward the jet bridge, James made one final mistake. He reached out as if to physically block her path. "Wait, I haven't cleared." "Do not touch me," Sarah said loudly and clearly, taking a step back. The crowd gasped. Several more phones came up to record. Lisa's face went from professional concern to outright alarm. "James Miller." Lisa's voice cut through the terminal like a whip. "Step away from that checkpoint immediately. Security team 2, please escort Mr. Miller to my office." She pressed her radio, speaking quickly. "This is Terminal Manager Rodriguez. I need HR representatives and our legal team to my office immediately." Two other security guards approached, looking uncomfortable but professional as they moved to escort their colleague away. James finally seemed to realize the gravity of his actions, his face straining of color as he saw the sea of recording phones and disapproving faces. Sarah straightened her suit jacket, her composure never wavering despite the situation. Lisa personally picked up Sarah's briefcase and gestured toward the jet bridge. "Please, let me walk you to your flight, Miss Thompson. We'll make sure you reach San Francisco with minimal delay. I assure you, this incident will be thoroughly addressed." As they walked toward the waiting private jet, Sarah could hear the murmurs of the crowd behind them. Some passengers were already posting the videos online. A group of regular clients were speaking animatedly with other staff members, clearly upset by what they had witnessed. The morning sun streamed through the terminal windows, highlighting the determination on Sarah's face. This incident would not be swept under the rug or forgotten. As she reached the door of her private jet, she turned to Lisa and said quietly but firmly, "I'll be expecting a formal response from your corporate office about this incident. This needs to be more than just a disciplinary action for one employee." Lisa nodded solemnly, knowing that this morning's events would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. While Sarah's private jet took off from LAX, the incident she left behind was causing a storm of activity throughout the terminal. Lisa Rodriguez sat in her office, surrounded by HR representatives, legal team members, and senior security staff. The videos of the confrontation were already spreading across social media platforms, gaining thousands of views by the minute. "This is a serious situation," said Marcus Jenkins, the head of terminal security, as he reviewed the security camera footage for the third time. The video clearly showed the different treatment between Sarah and other passengers. "We need immediate action." On Lisa's desk, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. The corporate office was calling repeatedly, and news organizations were already reaching out for comments. The terminal's PR team had arrived, looking worried as they scrolled through their phones, watching the incident go viral. "We have over 50 witness statements already," reported Sandra Chen from HR, shuffling through papers on the desk. "Multiple high-profile clients have filed formal complaints about Mr. Miller's behavior. Several are threatening to take their business elsewhere." James Miller sat in a separate office, under supervision. The security footage from the past 6 hours was under review, revealing a disturbing pattern. The data showed he had stopped and questioned 8 other passengers of color while quickly waving through white passengers with similar credentials. Back in the main terminal, regular clients were still discussing the incident. Michael Chen had stayed behind, speaking with other executives who witnessed the event. They were drafting a joint letter to the airport's board of directors, demanding systematic changes in security training and protocols. "I'd known Sarah Thompson for years," Michael told the group. "She's one of the most respected executives in Silicon Valley. This kind of treatment is exactly what we need to eliminate from corporate America." Lisa's office door opened, and Robert Phillips, the CEO of the private terminal company, walked in. He had flown in from headquarters as soon as he heard about the incident. His face was grave as he took in the room full of concerned staff. "I just got off the phone with Tech Forward's legal department," Robert announced. "They're not just asking for an apology. They want to see real changes in our security protocols and staff training." The PR team presented their initial response plan. "We need to act fast," said Karen Martinez, the head of PR. "This isn't just about one employee's actions. The public wants to know what we're going to do to prevent this from happening again." Security footage continued playing on the office monitor, showing the whole incident from multiple angles. Each viewing made it clearer how badly the situation had been handled. James Miller's actions have violated not just company policy, but possibly several anti-discrimination laws. "The training records show Miller completed our standard diversity training last week," Sandra reported, "but clearly, that's not enough. We need to completely overhaul our training program." Robert nodded, taking notes on his tablet. "I want a full investigation of our hiring practices, training procedures, and security protocols. We're going to fix this from the ground up." Outside the office, Maria, the receptionist who knew Sarah well, was being interviewed by internal investigators. "Ms. Thompson flies with us every week," she explained. "She's always professional, always has her documents ready. There was no reason for any of this." The terminal's regular security team was already implementing emergency changes. Every security checkpoint now required 2 officers present, and all extended questioning of passengers needed supervisor approval. Body cameras, which had been under discussion for months, were now being rushed into immediate deployment. Lisa's computer pinged with an email from Sarah's company. The merger signing in San Francisco had been delayed by 30 minutes, but Sarah had made it in time. However, the email made it clear that this incident wouldn't be forgotten. "We need to do more than damage control," Robert said, addressing the room. "This needs to be a turning point for our entire organization." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the terminal windows, the team worked on their comprehensive response plan. They all knew that tomorrow morning's news would feature this story, and their response needed to show more than just regret. It needed to demonstrate real commitment to change. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Sarah was proving why she was one of the most respected executives in her field. Despite the morning's ordeal, she had successfully led the merger signing, closing a deal worth hundreds of millions. But even as she worked, her phone was filling with messages of support from other executives and public figures who had seen the videos of her experience. The next morning, Sarah Thompson sat in her San Francisco office, watching her incident at LX playing on every major news channel. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the videos went viral. The story had exploded overnight, with social media platforms filled with hashtags like #FlyingWildAct and #PrivateJetDiscrimination. "Miss Thompson, CNN is on line 3, her assistant called through the intercom. "And Good Morning America wants to schedule an interview for tomorrow." Sarah took a deep breath, looking at the pile of interview requests on her desk. As a business executive, she was used to media attention, but this was different. Her personal experience had become a symbol of a larger problem in corporate America. Her office door opened, and Marcus Thompson, Tech Forward CEO, walked in. Despite having just closed a major merger, his main concern was clearly the airport incident. "Sarah, I just got off the phone with their corporate office," Marcus said. The next morning, the private terminal company's boardroom in San Francisco was filled with tension. 12 board members sat around the polished oak table, their faces serious as they waited for Sarah Thompson to arrive. Security camera footage from the incident played silently on the large screen behind them. Robert Phillips, the company's CEO, checked his watch nervously. The company's stock had fallen another 8% that morning. Major clients were threatening to take their business elsewhere, and celebrity customers were publicly announcing they would boycott the terminal. "Miss Thompson has arrived," his assistant announced through the intercom. Sarah walked into the room with confidence, accompanied by her legal team and Marcus Thompson, Tech Forward CEO. She carried a thick folder containing hundreds of emails she received from others sharing similar experiences of discrimination. "Thank you for meeting with me," Sarah began, her voice steady and professional. "I believe we all know why we're here." James Miller, the security guard, had already been fired after a complete review of his actions. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of discriminatory behavior that couldn't be ignored. But Sarah wasn't here to discuss one employee's actions. The incident with Mr. Miller was not just a single event, Sarah explained, opening her folder. It was a symptom of a larger problem in private aviation, and frankly, in corporate America as a whole. She placed several documents on the table: statistics showing discrimination patterns in private aviation, testimonials from other executives of color, and a detailed proposal for systematic changes. "Your current diversity training clearly isn't working," she continued, pointing to specific examples. "And your security protocols leave too much room for individual bias." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Sarah presented evidence of similar incidents at their terminals across the country. Many had gone unreported because the victims didn't have Sarah's platform or resources. "We're prepared to make significant changes," Robert assured her. "We've already announced new training programs and security protocols." Sarah shook her head. "Those are good first steps, but they're not enough. I have a more comprehensive proposal." She outlined her plan: an independent oversight committee for security operations, mandatory quarterly training for all staff, body cameras with regular footage review, and a new app for passengers to report their experiences anonymously. Additionally, Sarah added, "I want 20% of your security contracts to go to minority-owned security firms. And I want to see diversity targets for your executive team and board membership." The boardroom grew quiet. These were big demands, far beyond what they had expected. But the alternative, continued bad publicity and losing major clients, was worse. "Implementation will take time," one board member argued. "You have 30 days to begin the changes," Sarah replied firmly. "And I want quarterly progress reports sent to my office." Outside the boardroom, news crews waited for the meeting's outcome. The story had grown beyond one incident at LAX. It had become a catalyst for industry-wide change. "There's one more thing," Sarah said, pulling out a final document. "I want to establish a scholarship program for minority students interested in aviation management. Your company will fund it." Robert looked at his board members, then back at Sarah. They all knew they weren't in a position to refuse. The videos of the incident had been viewed millions of times. The public was demanding action. "We agree to your terms," Robert finally said. "All of them." Sarah nodded, but she wasn't finished. "And I want a personal meeting with James Miller." The room grew tense again. "Ms. Thompson, he's been terminated," Robert reminded her. "I know," Sarah replied. "But this isn't about punishment. It's about education and understanding. Sometimes, the only way to change minds is through direct conversation." As the meeting concluded, Sarah's phone buzzed with more messages. Other companies were reaching out, wanting to learn from this incident and improve their own practices. What had started as a humiliating experience was transforming into a movement for change. Outside, the San Francisco fog was lifting, revealing a clear sky. Sarah stood at the boardroom window, thinking about all the people who had shared their stories with her. The incident at LAX had opened a door, and she was going to make sure it stayed open for others to walk through. 1 week after the board meeting, Sarah Thompson sat in a small conference room at the LAX private terminal. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of air conditioning. Across from her sat James Miller, the former security guard, looking much different from the confrontational man who had blocked her path just days ago. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Mr. Miller," Sarah said calmly, noticing how he avoided direct eye contact. His once proud posture was now slumped, the weight of his actions clearly visible on his face. I didn't expect you would want to talk to me," James replied quietly. He had spent the past week watching his actions play out on national television, reading thousands of angry comments online, and facing the consequences of his choices. Sarah placed a folder on the table between them. "I've been reading about your background. 20 years in the military, 3 tours of duty, and a perfect record in your previous security jobs. What happened that morning? James shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The question hung in the air for a long moment before he finally spoke. I thought I was doing my job. I thought being extra careful meant being good at my job. But now I see what I was really doing. Outside the conference room, Lisa Rodriguez, the terminal manager, watched through the glass. The terminal felt different now. New security cameras had been installed, security staff wore body cameras, and diversity trainers were conducting daily sessions with all employees. I lost everything, James continued, his voice breaking slightly. My job, my reputation, my future in security work. My own children won't talk to me after seeing those videos. Sarah leaned forward. I didn't ask for this meeting to add to your punishment, Mr. Miller. I wanted to understand, and I wanted you to understand something too. She opened the folder and began sharing stories. Dozens of emails from other professionals of color who had faced similar discrimination. Stories of missed flights, humiliating searches, and constant suspicion, all because of their skin color. Every time something like this happens, Sarah explained, it doesn't just affect that moment. It affects careers, opportunities, and most importantly, it affects how people see themselves and their place in the world. James listened, really listened, for perhaps the first time. Tears formed in his eyes as he read through the stories. His hands trembled as he held the papers. I've spent the past week thinking about every security check I've ever done, he admitted. Looking back at my decisions, my assumptions. I was wrong, Ms. Thompson. Deeply wrong. Sarah nodded, acknowledging his words. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? James looked up, surprised. Do? I thought my career was over. It's true, you won't work in aviation security again. Sarah confirmed. But you have an opportunity here. Your story, your mistake, and what you learned from it could help others understand their own biases. She pulled out another document. The new training program we're developing needs people who can speak from experience. People who can admit their mistakes and help others learn from them. Outside, the usual bustle of the terminal continued. New signs had been posted about reporting discrimination, and passengers of all backgrounds were being treated with equal respect by the security teams. You want me to help with training? James asked, disbelief in his voice. Sometimes the best teachers are those who have learned the hardest lessons, Sarah replied. This isn't forgiveness, Mr. Miller. This is about turning a mistake into something meaningful. James wiped his eyes, straightening in his chair. I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Sarah stood up, gathering her papers. The training program starts next month. Your story will be part of it, along with the stories of those affected by similar actions. It won't be easy, but it's necessary. As she walked out of the conference room, Sarah saw Lisa giving instructions to a new group of security staff. The changes were already visible. More diverse faces among the security teams, clearer protocols posted at every checkpoint, and a new atmosphere of respect throughout the terminal. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Other airports were now requesting information about their new training program. What had started as one discriminatory incident was spreading ripples of change throughout the industry. Outside, a private jet took off into the clear blue sky, carrying another executive to another meeting. But today, the path to that jet was clearer, fairer, and more equal than it had been just 1 week ago. 6 months after the incident at LAX, Sarah Thompson stood at a podium in a large conference hall in Washington, D.C. The room was packed with aviation industry leaders, government officials, and civil rights activists. Behind her, a large screen showed the title of her keynote speech, Creating Real Change in Corporate America. What happened to me that morning wasn't unique, Sarah began, her voice carrying through the silent hall. What was unique was that I had the platform to do something about it. In the front row, Lisa Rodriguez and Robert Phillips from the private terminal company sat watching. Their company had undergone massive changes in the past 6 months. The new security protocols they developed had become a model for airports across the country. Change isn't just about firing one person or adding one training session, Sarah continued, clicking to her next slide. It's about completely reimagining how we approach equality in our businesses. The statistics on the screen told a powerful story. Since implementing the new programs, discrimination complaints at private airports had dropped by 70%. More importantly, customer satisfaction scores had increased across all demographic groups. In the audience, James Miller sat quietly near the back. He looked different now, humbler, more thoughtful. He had spent the past months traveling to different airports, sharing his story as part of their new training program. His honest accounts of his mistakes and learning had become a powerful tool for change. The scholarship program we established has already selected its first class, Sarah announced proudly. 20 young people of color will begin their aviation management studies next fall, with guaranteed internships at major airports. The screen showed pictures of the scholarship recipients, bright, ambitious students who would help shape the future of aviation. The audience broke into applause, many standing to show their support. But our work isn't finished, Sarah continued once the applause died down. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Aviation Equality Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting diversity and preventing discrimination in all aspects of air travel. Cameras flashed as Sarah revealed the details of the new organization. Major airlines had already pledged millions in support, and industry leaders were lining up to join its board of directors. In the months since the incident, Sarah had received numerous awards and recognition, but she hadn't done this for acclaim. Each week, she still received emails from people sharing their stories of discrimination, but now these stories often ended differently, with reports of swift action taken and real changes made. The app we developed for reporting discrimination incidents has been downloaded over 1 million times, Sarah explained, showing the interface on the screen. Every report is investigated, every voice is heard. She clicked to a new slide showing security staff wearing body cameras, diverse teams working at checkpoints, and clear posting of passengers' rights. These images were now common at airports across the country. This isn't just about airports or private terminals, Sarah said, her voice growing passionate. This is about creating spaces where everyone is treated with equal respect and dignity. This is about making sure that success and status aren't undermined by prejudice and bias. As she concluded her speech, Sarah shared one final story. Just last week, she had flown through the same LAX terminal where the incident occurred. The security team was diverse, professional, and treated every passenger with equal respect. The terminal manager proudly showed her the perfect customer satisfaction scores they had maintained for 3 straight months. Change is possible, Sarah said, looking out at the audience. But it requires more than just good intentions. It requires action, accountability, and constant vigilance. The standing ovation lasted for several minutes. As Sarah left the stage, she saw people already taking notes, making plans, ready to implement similar changes in their own organizations. Outside the conference hall, the Washington Monument stood tall against the blue sky. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. Another company requesting her help in reviewing their security protocols. The incident that could have been just another story of discrimination had instead become a catalyst for lasting change. As she walked to her next meeting, Sarah passed a group of young aviation management students touring the conference. They looked at her with admiration, knowing her story, knowing that because of her actions, their paths would be a little easier, their opportunities a little more secure. The changes she had started would continue long after this conference ended, creating ripples of equality that would spread far beyond one incident at one airport on one morning.